They say blood is thicker than water, but I'm here to tell you that greed can poison even the thickest blood. My own son tried to steal from me, not just my money, but a secret I'd kept buried for 6 years. A secret so valuable that people had already killed for it. And when that phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, I had no idea I was about to discover that my sweet boy had become a thief, a liar, and possibly an accessory to murder. But here's the thing about underestimating a 68-year-old widow: we've survived longer than most for a reason. That's exactly where I was last Friday when everything changed forever. My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie. I've been a widow for 3 years now, ever since my dear Frank passed from a sudden heart attack. Our little ranch house feels too big some days, too quiet others. But that night, the silence was about to shatter in ways I never expected. "Mom?" Andrew's voice cracked through the speaker, and I could hear something I hadn't heard since he was 12 and broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball. Fear. Raw, desperate fear. "Andrew, honey, what's wrong?" It's nearly midnight. I muted the television, my full attention now on my only child, my 35-year-old son who lived 800 miles away in Dallas with his wife Courtney and their twin girls. "Mom, I need help. Big help. Like, right now help. Now, let me pause here and ask you something. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from around the world, because I have a feeling this story is going to hit home no matter what country you're in. Family betrayal? It's universal, isn't it? Back to that phone call. Andrew was breathing heavy, like he'd been running. "Mom, there's a business deal going south. The investors are pulling out tomorrow morning unless I can come up with $50,000. Cash. By noon. $50,000. Just like that. Dropped into our conversation like it was $50. Here's the thing about being a parent: you never stop wanting to fix your child's problems. Even when that child is a grown man with his own family and his own mortgage. Frank and I had always been careful with money. We owned our home outright, had decent savings, and yes, we could handle $50,000 without breaking the bank. But something felt wrong. Terribly, gut-wrenchingly wrong. "Andrew, slow down. What kind of business deal requires cash by noon on a Saturday? And why didn't you mention this before tonight?" "It's complicated, Mom. Courtney's cousin has this import business, and we put our house up as collateral. If this falls through..." His voice broke. "Mom, we could lose everything. I'm going to stop right there because I want you to think about this. Put yourself in my shoes. Your child calls, desperate, claiming they might lose their home. What would you do? Would you wire the money immediately? Or would something make you pause? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my son. Andrew, I need more details. Who exactly is this cousin? What's the business? And why haven't you mentioned any of this before?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, "Mom, there's no time for 20 questions. I need to know, can you help or not?" That tone. Cold. Almost demanding. This wasn't my Andrew asking for help, this was someone giving me an ultimatum. "Son, I can help, but I need to understand." "Fine. Forget it. I'll figure something else out." Click. He hung up on me. My own son hung up on me. I sat there in my recliner, the phone still in my hand, staring at the muted TV screen where a commercial for vacation cruises played silently. My heart was pounding, not from worry anymore, but from something else entirely. Suspicion. Because here's what Andrew didn't know, what nobody knew except Frank and me, and Frank took the secret to his grave. Buried beneath my bedroom floorboards, inside a fireproof box that hasn't been opened in 3 years, sits a deed to a small stone house on Spain's Costa Brava. A house we bought impulsively during our 30th anniversary trip to Barcelona. A house worth easily 3 times what Andrew was asking for. But that's not the strangest part. The strangest part is what arrived in my mailbox exactly 1 week before that midnight phone call. A letter from a Miami law firm, claiming someone was trying to access property records for a Spanish villa, in my name. Someone knew about our secret house. Someone was trying to claim it. And now, 7 days later, my son was demanding $50,000 with no real explanation. Coincidence? I think not. What do you think happened next? Subscribe to Madame Susan's stories if you haven't already, because this tale is just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe where it goes. Let me take you back to Barcelona, 2018. Frank and I were celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary, walking the narrow cobblestone streets of the Gothic Quarter. We'd saved for 3 years for this trip, our first real vacation since Andrew graduated college. I remember Frank stopping suddenly in front of a small real estate office window. "Maggie, look at this." He pointed to a faded photograph of a stone house with blue shutters, perched on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean. The sign read Costa Brava, €85,000. "Frank, we're just looking," I laughed, but he was already pushing open the door. 3 hours later, we were driving along winding coastal roads with a Spanish real estate agent named Carlos, who spoke broken English but had an infectious smile. The house was smaller than it looked in the photo, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that belonged in a museum. But the view, oh, the view. "It needs work," Carlos admitted, "but the bones are good." "And this location?" He spread his arms wide toward the endless blue horizon. "This location is magic." Frank squeezed my hand. We'd been married long enough that I knew that look. That's the same look he had when he proposed, when we bought our first house, when we decided to have Andrew. "It's crazy," I whispered to him while Carlos showed us the tiny garden. "The best decisions usually are," Frank whispered back. We bought it that afternoon. Signed the papers, wired the money from our vacation fund and then some, and became the proud owners of Casa Esperanza, House of Hope. But here's why we kept it secret. Andrew had just started his marketing firm in Dallas. He was struggling, asking for loans every few months. Courtney was pregnant with the twins, and they'd bought a house way beyond their means. If they knew we had money for a second home in Spain, they'd never stop asking for help. "Let's keep this between us," Frank said as we sat on the little terrace that first evening, sharing a bottle of local wine. "Someday, when Andrew's more stable, we'll tell him. Maybe even give it to him as a surprise." So we kept our secret. For 6 years, we visited twice a year. Frank learned basic Spanish. I planted herbs in the garden. We made friends with the neighbors, Elena, who brought us fresh bread, and Miguel, who fixed our shutters when the Mediterranean winds blew too hard. Frank died before we could tell Andrew about Casa Esperanza. Heart attack at 65, right there in our Asheville driveway, returning from a grocery run. The paramedic said it was instant, he didn't suffer. During the funeral arrangements, the grief, the endless paperwork that comes with death, the Spanish house felt like a dream. Something too beautiful to be real. I kept the deed in Frank's old lockbox and tried to forget about it. But you can't forget about a dream house on the Spanish coast. Especially when someone else apparently knows it exists. After Andrew's phone call that Friday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, that cold tone when I asked questions. This wasn't desperation, this was manipulation. But how could my son know about Casa Esperanza? At 3 a.m., I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I pried up the loose floorboard in my bedroom and pulled out Frank's old lockbox. The key was still on my keychain, right where it had always been. Inside, our passports, Frank's military medals, our marriage certificate, and at the bottom, wrapped in plastic, the deed to Casa Esperanza. But something else was there too. Something I'd forgotten about. A folder labeled Emergency Contacts, Spain. Frank had been so thorough. Inside were business cards for Carlos the real estate agent, the local bank manager, even the neighbor Elena's phone number. And there, paper clipped to the folder, was a receipt from a Madrid law firm. Frank had updated the will to include the Spanish property just months before he died. But when our family lawyer read the will after the funeral, he'd only mentioned the Asheville house, the savings accounts, the local investments. Had the Spanish property been omitted on purpose? Or had someone made sure it wasn't mentioned? My hands were shaking as I pulled out my laptop and Googled the Miami law firm from that mysterious letter. Their website was professional, expensive looking. They specialized in international property law and estate disputes. I clicked on their recent cases section and nearly dropped the laptop. Successful recovery of undisclosed Spanish assets for American heirs. The case study was vague, but the timeline matched perfectly. Someone had hired this firm 6 months ago to track down a Spanish property owned by an American widow. They'd found it, verified ownership, and were working with the family to resolve the matter discreetly. Someone was coming for my house. But who? And how did they know it existed? Keep watching to find out what I discovered next, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for Madam Susan's stories because this mystery is about to get a whole lot deeper. Saturday morning came too soon. I'd been up all night, my mind spinning like a washing machine stuck on the rinse cycle. Coffee tasted like cardboard, but I needed the caffeine to think straight. The Miami letter sat on my kitchen table like a coiled snake. I'd read it so many times the words were burned into my memory, but I spread it out again anyway. Dear Mrs. Margaret Caldwell, we represent interested parties regarding property ID #ES 2018-7743B, located in Tossa de Mar, Costa Brava, Spain. Our research indicates you may be the legal owner of this property. Please contact our office immediately to discuss resolution of this matter. Failure to respond within 30 days may result in legal proceedings. Sincerely, Blackwood and Associates, International Property Law. 30 days. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago. That gave me exactly 7 days before their deadline. But here's what chilled me to the bone, they knew the exact property ID number. Not just that we owned something in Spain, but the specific legal identification of Casa Esperanza. That's not information you stumble across. That's information you hunt for. I grabbed my phone and did what any suspicious grandma would do, I started detective work. First stop, Google. I typed in Blackwood and Associates Miami and found their sleek website. But something felt off. The testimonials were generic, no last names, no photos. The About Us section mentioned decades of experience but didn't name any specific attorneys. Then I tried something Frank taught me. I looked up their business license on Florida's state website. Blackwood and Associates was incorporated just 8 months ago. 8 months. So much for decades of experience. My heart was pounding as I clicked on the Contact Us page. The address looked legitimate, a high-rise office building in downtown Miami. But when I used Google Street View to virtually visit the building, I noticed something strange. The directory in the lobby, visible through the glass doors, was crystal clear. I could read every business name. Blackwood and Associates wasn't listed. Now I was getting scared. Someone was impersonating a law firm to get information about my Spanish house. But why the elaborate setup? Why not just? And then it hit me like a slap across the face. Andrew. I rushed to my laptop and pulled up Facebook, something I rarely did, but Courtney was always posting pictures. I scrolled through her recent posts, my hands shaking. There it was. 3 weeks ago, exactly when that fake letter was dated. A photo of Courtney and Andrew at some fancy restaurant in Dallas. But it wasn't the restaurant that caught my attention. It was Courtney's caption. Celebrating our new business venture. Big changes coming for the Caldwell family. Bottle with popping cork sparkles #new beginnings #family secrets. Family secrets. She actually used those words. I clicked on the comments, and my blood went cold. Someone named Miami_legal_pro had liked the post. The profile was private, created just a month ago, with no photo. But the username was public, Miami_legal_pro. My son and his wife weren't victims of some random scam. They were the scammers. But wait, there was more. I kept scrolling through Courtney's photos, going back months. Most were the usual stuff: family dinners, the twins' soccer games, vacation snapshots. But then I found something that made my stomach drop. A photo from last Christmas, taken right here in my living room. Andrew and Courtney were opening presents with the twins. Nothing suspicious about that, except for one tiny detail in the background. Frank's old desk was visible behind the Christmas tree. And on that desk, clear as day in the photo, was the lockbox. The same lockbox where I kept the Spanish deed. The photo had 47 likes and a dozen comments. Anyone could have zoomed in, enhanced the image, seen that lockbox sitting there like a treasure chest waiting to be discovered. I felt sick. How long had they been planning this? How long had they known about Casa Esperanza? My phone rang, making me jump. Andrew's name flashed on the screen again. I stared at it for 3 rings, 4, 5. Then I answered. Hi, Andrew. Mom, I'm sorry about last night. I was stressed, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. His voice was different now, softer, more like the son I remembered. Apology accepted, honey. Look, I know 50,000 is a lot to ask. But this business deal, it could change everything for us. Set up the twins' college funds, maybe even buy a vacation house someday. A vacation house. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. Andrew, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe I can help. The relief in his voice was audible. Really? Mom, you're a lifesaver. I can have Courtney drive up tomorrow to pick up the check, or if you want to wire it. Actually, I was thinking we should meet in person. All of us. You, Courtney, the twins. It's been too long since I've seen my granddaughters. Silence. Long, suspicious silence. Mom, this is kind of time-sensitive. The wire transfer would be faster. Time-sensitive. Just like that fake legal deadline. Andrew, are you hiding something from me? Another pause. What would I be hiding, Mom? Everything, apparently. You know what's funny about lies? They have a smell to them. Not literally, but after 35 years of raising a child and 30 years of marriage, you develop a sixth sense for when someone isn't telling you the truth. Andrew was lying. The question was, about what exactly? After hanging up with my son, I did something I hadn't done since Frank's funeral. I opened our old photo albums, the real ones, not the digital stuff on phones. Frank insisted on printing pictures from every trip we took, every anniversary, every Christmas. I found the Barcelona album, thick with memories and restaurant receipts Frank insisted on keeping. For taxes, he'd always say, though we both knew he just liked having proof of our adventures. There we were at Park Güell, squinting in the Spanish sun. Frank feeding pigeons in Plaza Cataluna while I laughed at his terrible Spanish pronunciation. And then, the real estate office. I'd forgotten Carlos had taken photos of us signing the papers. There was Frank, serious and focused, reading every line of the contract with his reading glasses perched on his nose. There was me, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning, holding the keys to Casa Esperanza. But it was the next photo that stopped my heart. Carlos had snapped a picture of us standing in front of the stone house on that first day. Frank had his arm around me, and we were both beaming. But in the background, barely visible, was a small sign in Spanish and English, property registered, public record. Public record. Of course. If someone knew where to look, if they had the right connections, if they spoke Spanish or hired someone who did, they could find out about Casa Esperanza. Property records in Spain, like most countries, were accessible if you knew the system. But that still didn't explain how Andrew and Courtney had connected me to a specific property in Taça de March. Unless. I flipped through more photos, looking for clues I'd missed. And there it was, in a picture Frank had taken of me cooking dinner in the tiny Casa Esperanza kitchen. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a flamenco dancer, was a piece of paper. I grabbed my magnifying glass, yes, I actually owned one, don't judge me, and studied the photo closely. It was a utility bill, with our Spanish address printed clearly at the top. And in the bottom corner of the photo, you could just make out a cell phone sitting on the counter. My cell phone. The same number Andrew called every week. Someone could have reverse searched that phone number, found it connected to utility bills in Spain, and started digging from there. It wouldn't be easy, but for someone motivated by money, it was possible. Frank and I had been so careful about keeping the house secret from Andrew, but we'd been careless about digital footprints. Photos with background details. Phone numbers on foreign utility bills. Credit card statements that someone could access if they really wanted to. I was starting to understand how Andrew and Courtney had found out about Casa Esperanza. What I still couldn't figure out was their endgame. The fake law firm letter was designed to panic me into revealing the property's existence. Andrew's desperate phone call was meant to extract money quickly, before I had time to think or ask questions. But $50,000? That wasn't enough to buy Casa Esperanza, which was probably worth at least $200,000 by now, maybe more with the way coastal Spanish property values had climbed. Unless they weren't trying to buy it. I picked up the fake Miami letter again and read it more carefully. Interested parties regarding property ID #ES 2018-7743B, resolution of this matter, legal proceedings. What if they weren't trying to get me to sell them the house? What if they were trying to get me to sign it over to avoid fake legal trouble? What if the $50,000 emergency was just phase one of a bigger con? I was about to find out just how deep this betrayal went, and trust me, it was worse than I ever imagined. Sunday morning brought no peace, just more questions. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning while my mind replayed every conversation I'd had with Andrew and Courtney over the past year. Were there signs I'd missed? Clues I'd ignored? I made coffee and settled at my kitchen table with my laptop. Time for some serious social media detective work. Now, I'm not what you'd call Facebook savvy, but I know enough to be dangerous. I pulled up Courtney's profile and started scrolling backward through months of posts. Soccer games, birthday parties, girls' nights out, all the normal stuff you'd expect from a suburban mom. But then I hit July, and my coffee mug nearly slipped from my hands. There was Courtney, standing in front of a stone building with blue shutters, arms spread wide like she owned the place. The caption read, "Sometimes you discover the most amazing places when you least expect it." #Spain vibes, #hidden gems, #family history. Family history. My blood turned to ice. The building behind her wasn't Casa Esperanza, but it was close enough to be in the same neighborhood. Same style, same Mediterranean coastline in the background. She'd been to Taça de March. My Taça de March. I clicked on the comments, my hands shaking. Andrew had written, "Beautiful spot, babe. We should definitely go back someday." Courtney replied, "Already planning our return trip. Some places just call to you, you know? Like they're meant to be part of your story. Meant to be part of your story." I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. But I kept scrolling through the comments, and found something even more disturbing. A woman named Diana Blackwood had commented, "Gorgeous. Property values in that area are skyrocketing. Perfect time to invest." Diana Blackwood. As in Blackwood and Associates, the fake Miami law firm. I clicked on Diana's profile. Private, of course, but her profile picture showed a woman in her 40s with bleached blonde hair and too much makeup. The kind of person who'd run a con game and think she looked legitimate. Her friend list was small, maybe 30 people. But 3 names jumped out at me: Andrew Caldwell, Courtney Caldwell, and someone called Miami_legal_pro. The same Miami_legal_pro who'd liked Courtney's family secrets post. My son and daughter-in-law weren't just victims of a scam. They were partners in it. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I'd discovered. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment emergency. This was months in the planning. Maybe longer. They'd found out about Casa Esperanza somehow, probably through those background details in our Barcelona photos. Then they'd traveled to Spain to scout the property, maybe even pose as potential buyers to get inside information about its value. Next, they'd created a fake law firm and fake legal pressure to panic me into revealing the house or signing it over. When that didn't work fast enough, Andrew called with his emergency loan story, hoping to extract money quickly while they figured out their next move. But here's what really made me angry: they'd involved the twins in this lie. Those sweet little girls I'd been missing, wondering why Andrew's visits had become so infrequent. They'd been using my own granddaughters as pawns in their scheme. I scrolled further back in Courtney's photos and found more evidence. Pictures from their Spain trip that I'd somehow missed before. Andrew and Courtney having dinner at a restaurant I recognized, the same place Frank and I ate every time we visited Taça de March. There was Courtney walking down the exact street where Casa Esperanza sat, just 2 blocks out of frame. There was Andrew talking to an older Spanish man who looked suspiciously like our neighbor Miguel. They hadn't just visited the area. They'd researched it thoroughly. Talked to locals. Maybe even asked about the American couple who owned the little stone house with blue shutters. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew: "Mom, thought about it overnight. If you can wire the money today, I can get this business deal locked up before close of business Monday. Really appreciate you helping us out. Love you. Love you." Right. I texted back, "I'll need a few more details first. What's the name of this business you're investing in?" His response came quickly: "It's complicated. Imports and exports. Courtney's cousin handles all the paperwork. I just need to know if you can help. Imports and exports." The same vague description he'd given on the phone. I tried a different approach. "Which cousin of Courtney's?" "I don't think I've met them." This time the response took longer. "You haven't. They're on her mother's side. Lives in Miami." Miami. Of course they did. I was getting tired of playing games. It was time to let Andrew know that his dear old mom wasn't as clueless as he thought. "Andrew," I texted, "I've been thinking about taking a trip. Maybe somewhere warm. Spain sounds lovely this time of year." The 3 dots showing he was typing appeared and disappeared several times. Then, "Spain? That's random. Why Spain?" "Oh, just heard good things about the Costa Brava. Ever been there yourself?" Another long pause. Then, "No, never been to Spain. Heard it's nice though." Liar. And now it was time to show my son exactly what happens when you try to con a grandmother who raised you better than that. You know what they say about a mother's intuition? Well, grandmother's intuition is twice as sharp and 3 times as dangerous. Especially when someone's trying to steal from you. Monday morning, I did something I hadn't done since Frank passed. I got dressed up. Not funeral dressed up, but business dressed up. Navy blue blazer, sensible heels, and my best poker face. First stop, the Buncombe County Courthouse. Now, I'd never researched property records before, but I figured if Andrew and Courtney could learn about international property law, this old dog could learn a few new tricks too. The clerk, a sweet girl named Tammy who couldn't have been older than my granddaughters, helped me navigate the computer system. "What exactly are you looking for, Mrs. Caldwell?" "I need to see if anyone's been searching for information about my properties." "Is that possible?" Tammy's eyebrows shot up. "You mean like a records request?" "Those are public information. Someone files a request, we keep a copy." My heart started racing. "How far back do those records go?" "Oh, years. Let me check your name in the system." She typed for a few minutes, then frowned at the screen. "That's odd. Someone did request information about your property 6 months ago. But they didn't just ask for your current home address. They requested all associated properties, domestic and international, connected to Frank and Margaret Caldwell. 6 months ago. Right around the time Andrew and Courtney would have been planning their Spain trip. Who made the request? Tammy clicked through a few more screens. A law firm called Blackwood and Associates. Address in Miami, Florida. There it was. Proof that this whole thing had been orchestrated from the beginning. Tammy, can I get a copy of that request? Sure thing, honey. While she printed the documents, I asked the question that was really bothering me. Is it normal for people to request international property information from a North Carolina courthouse? Not really, she admitted. Most folks don't even know you can do that. You'd have to know the right legal terminology, the right forms to file. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for. I thanked Tammy and walked back to my car with a smoking gun in my purse. But I wasn't done yet. Next stop, First National Bank, where Frank and I had done our banking for 30 years. Jerry Patterson, the branch manager, had handled Frank's funeral paperwork and knew our family well. He welcomed me into his office with the usual small-town pleasantries, but I cut straight to the chase. Jerry, I need to know if anyone's been asking questions about my accounts. Specifically, anyone claiming to be family or representing legal interests. His expression grew serious. Margaret, you know I can't discuss specific account inquiries, but has someone been bothering you? My son asked me for $50,000 over the weekend. Emergency business loan. But something doesn't feel right. Jerry leaned back in his chair. Margaret, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but someone did call last week asking about your financial capacity. Said they were from a law firm, needed to verify assets for an estate matter. My blood pressure spiked. What did you tell them? Nothing, of course. We don't give out account information over the phone. But they seem to know an awful lot about your family situation. Mentioned Andrew by name, knew about Frank's passing, even asked about overseas investments. Overseas investments. They were fishing for information about Casa Esperanza. Jerry, I need a favor. If anyone else calls asking about my accounts, family, lawyers, anyone, don't tell them anything. And call me immediately. Of course. Margaret, is everything okay? Should we be worried about fraud? I almost laughed. Jerry, I think the fraud has already started. But don't worry, I'm about to put a stop to it. On the drive home, my phone rang. Andrew again. Hi, Mom. Just checking in about that loan. Any decisions? I took a deep breath. Time to start laying my own trap. Actually, Andrew, I've been thinking. $50,000 is a lot of money to wire blindly. What if I drove down to Dallas instead? Brought the check in person? I could meet this cousin of Courtney's, see the business plan myself. Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. Mom, that's really not necessary. This is a time-sensitive deal, and... Andrew, if you want my money, you'll do this my way. I'm an old woman, but I'm not a foolish one. Another pause. Then, let me talk to Courtney and get back to you. You do that, son. Take all the time you need. After I hung up, I sat in my driveway for a full 10 minutes, just thinking. My son was trying to steal from me. My daughter-in-law was his accomplice. They'd involved strangers, created fake businesses, filed false legal documents. But here's what they didn't know, Margaret Caldwell wasn't just some lonely widow they could manipulate. I was about to remind them that I didn't raise a fool, and I sure didn't raise a thief. Wednesday evening, prayer meeting at Grace Baptist Church. Normally, I look forward to our weekly gathering, good people, honest conversation, and Dolores Murphy's famous lemon bars. But this week, I had an agenda. See, here's something about small towns that city folks don't understand. Information travels faster than gossip, and gossip travels faster than lightning. If you want to know something about somebody, you ask their church family. I'd been thinking about Courtney's Spain photos, specifically that comment from Diana Blackwood about property values skyrocketing. How would a fake lawyer from Miami know about Spanish real estate trends unless she'd done serious research? After Pastor Williams finished his lesson on trust and family bonds, the irony wasn't lost on me. I cornered Dolores by the coffee station. Dolores, you've got family in Florida, don't you? My sister lives in Tampa. Why do you ask, Margaret? I'm trying to track down information about a law firm in Miami. Blackwood and Associates. Ever heard of them? Dolores shook her head, but Ethel Parker, who'd been eavesdropping as usual, perked up. Did you say Blackwood? That name rings a bell. Ethel tapped her temple with a perfectly manicured finger. My grandson works for a tech company that does background checks. He mentioned something about fake law firms using common names like Blackwood or Stone to sound legitimate. My pulse quickened. Fake law firms? Oh yes, it's apparently a whole industry. People create official-looking websites, rent fancy addresses, even get business licenses. They use them for all sorts of scams, insurance fraud, property disputes, inheritance cons. Eleanor Chen, our church treasurer, joined the conversation. Margaret, are you having legal troubles? Because my daughter's a paralegal in Charlotte, and she could recommend someone legitimate. I almost told them everything right there. The fake letter, Andrew's lies, Courtney's Spanish adventure. But something held me back, maybe maternal instinct, maybe just stubborn pride. Just trying to verify some paperwork, I said instead. Nothing serious. But Ethel wasn't finished. You know, Margaret, my grandson could probably run a quick check on that law firm if you want. He's got access to all sorts of databases. That would be helpful, thank you. I'll call him tonight. What's the full name again? Blackwood and Associates, International Property Law. Eleanor frowned. International property law? That's pretty specialized. Most scam firms stick to simple stuff, personal injury, debt collection. International law requires actual expertise. Unless, I thought, they're targeting one specific international property and just need to sound convincing enough to fool one lonely widow. Dolores leaned closer, lowering her voice. Margaret, this wouldn't have anything to do with Andrew, would it? I hate to mention it, but Clara Henderson saw him and Courtney at that fancy steakhouse in Hendersonville last month. Said they were dressed to the nines, celebrating something big. My stomach dropped. When exactly was this? Oh, early August maybe? Clara said she almost went over to say hello, but they looked like they were having a serious business discussion with another couple. August. Right after Courtney's Spain trip, if the Facebook timeline was accurate. Did Clara recognize the other couple? No, but she said the woman had platinum blonde hair and too much jewelry. You know how Clara notices these things. Platinum blonde hair. Like Diana Blackwood's profile picture. They'd been meeting in person. Planning this scam in my own backyard, probably laughing about how easy it would be to fool Andrew's trusting old mother. The prayer meeting wound down, but my mind was racing. As I gathered my purse and Bible, Ethel caught my arm. Margaret, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you've seemed troubled lately. If there's anything our church family can do to help. I squeezed her hand. Pray for wisdom, Ethel. And maybe for patience. I have a feeling I'm going to need both. Driving home, I realized something important. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was focused. Andrew and Courtney thought they were dealing with a grieving widow who'd lost her sharp edge along with her husband. They were about to learn that some edges only get sharper with time. Thursday morning brought unexpected help in the form of Ethel Parker's grandson, Tyler. The boy, and I say boy though he's probably 30, showed up at my door with a laptop bag and the kind of confidence that comes from growing up digital. Mrs. Caldwell? Grandma Ethel asked me to help you research that law firm. I invited him in, made coffee, and watched him work magic on my kitchen table. Okay, so Blackwood and Associates, he said, typing rapidly. Their website looks professional, but let me dig deeper. His fingers flew across the keyboard like he was playing piano. Within minutes, he was shaking his head. This is definitely fake. Want to see how I know? Tyler turned the laptop toward me. First, their web domain was registered 8 months ago, but they claim decades of experience. Second, all their case studies use stock photos. I can reverse search the images and find them on Shutterstock. Third, their office address? It's a mail forwarding service. He clicked through several screens, showing me evidence I never would have found on my own. But here's the really interesting part, Mrs. Caldwell. The domain registration? It's not under Blackwood and Associates. It's registered to something called CTC Holdings. What's CTC Holdings? Good question. Let me find out. More typing, more screens flashing by. Tyler reminded me of Frank when he was working on tax returns, completely absorbed, muttering to himself. Okay, this is weird. CTC Holdings is a Delaware shell company, which means it's designed to hide the real owners. But shell companies have to file paperwork, and that paperwork sometimes has breadcrumbs. He pulled up what looked like a government database. The registered agent for CTC Holdings is listed as Courtney Teresa Caldwell. My coffee mug hit the table harder than I intended. Are you certain? Positive. Address matches your son's house in Dallas. Mrs. Caldwell, your daughter-in-law legally owns the fake law firm that's been harassing you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Seeing it in black and white, in official government records, made the betrayal feel final. Tyler looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell. I know this must be hard to hear. Actually, Tyler, you've been incredibly helpful. Is there anything else you can find? Well, if you want to get really technical. He hesitated. I could look up travel records, credit card transactions, social media analytics. But that might be crossing some legal lines. What kind of travel records? Flight manifests are sometimes public information, especially international flights. If your daughter-in-law flew to Spain recently, there might be a record. I thought about it for a moment. Was I ready to invade my family's privacy this thoroughly? Then I remembered Andrew's voice on the phone, cold and demanding. Courtney's fake Facebook comments about family secrets. Do it. Tyler's search confirmed what I already suspected. Courtney Teresa Caldwell had flown from Dallas to Barcelona on July 15th, returning July 22nd. Andrew Michael Caldwell had been on the same flights. They stayed for a week, Tyler noted. That's a long time for just scouting a property. Unless they were doing more than scouting. Tyler pulled up another screen. Mrs. Caldwell, I probably shouldn't show you this, but your daughter-in-law made some interesting credit card purchases in Spain. The list made my blood boil. Notary services, Barcelona, €150. Document translation, Barcelona, €75. Real estate consultation, Tassa de Mar, €200. Legal research services, Madrid, €300. They hadn't just visited Spain. They'd hired professionals to help them understand Spanish property law, document requirements, legal processes. This wasn't a casual vacation, it was a business trip. Tyler, can you print all of this for me? Sure thing. Mrs. Caldwell, if you don't mind me asking, what are you planning to do with this information? I smiled, probably the first genuine smile I'd felt in days. I'm going to give my son exactly what he's asking for. After Tyler left, I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of evidence that would make any prosecutor happy. Fake business registration. Travel records. Credit card receipts. A paper trail showing months of premeditation. But instead of calling the police, I picked up my phone and dialed Andrew. Hi, Mom. Any thoughts about that loan? Actually, Andrew, I've made a decision. I want to help you and Courtney. But I think we should discuss this in person. In person? Mom, I told you, this is time sensitive. Andrew. My voice carried the same tone I'd used when he was 8 years old and had broken Mrs. Henderson's window. I'm driving to Dallas this weekend. We're going to sit down like a family and discuss this properly. No phone calls, no text messages. Face to face. A long pause. Mom, I don't think that's necessary. Son, it's not a request. I'll be there Saturday afternoon. Make sure Courtney's there too. And Andrew? Make sure your cousin from Miami can join us. I'm very eager to meet them. Because it was time for the Caldwell family to have a little reunion, and some long overdue honesty. Saturday morning, I loaded my Honda Accord with overnight bags and a manila folder thick with evidence. The 8-hour drive to Dallas gave me plenty of time to think, plan, and prepare for what might be the most important conversation of my life. I'd called ahead to book a room at the Hampton Inn near Andrew's house, neutral territory where I could retreat if things went badly. Because honestly, I wasn't sure how this was going to end. Andrew's house in the Lakewood suburb looked exactly like every other house on the block, 2-story colonial, manicured lawn, 2-car garage. The kind of place that screamed successful young family but probably cost more than Frank and I paid for our entire house. I parked in their driveway and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the front window, I could see movement inside. Andrew pacing back and forth in the living room, phone pressed to his ear. Even from the car, his body language screamed stress. The front door opened before I could knock. Courtney appeared, perfectly styled as always, but her smile looked like it had been painted on with a shaky hand. Margaret. What a wonderful surprise. Andrew didn't mention you were coming this weekend. Didn't he? That's strange, since I specifically told him I'd be here Saturday afternoon. I kept my voice sweet, but Courtney's eye twitched. Well, come in, come in. The girls are at soccer practice, but they'll be so excited to see their grandma. The house was immaculate in that staged way that suggested they'd spent the morning hiding evidence. No scattered mail on the kitchen counter, no random papers on the coffee table. Everything was too perfect. Andrew appeared from the kitchen, and I was shocked by how he looked. Dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed. This wasn't the polished businessman I remembered. Hey, Mom. His hug felt obligatory. How was the drive? Educational. Andrew, you look terrible. What's going on? Just work stress. You know how it is. But I was watching Courtney, who was fidgeting with her wedding ring and avoiding eye contact. Something was very wrong here, beyond even the Spain scam. We sat in their pristine living room, and I decided to start with the basics. So, Andrew, tell me more about this business opportunity. The one that requires $50,000 by Monday. Andrew and Courtney exchanged a look that lasted about 3 seconds too long. It's like I told you, Mom. Import-export business. Courtney's cousin has connections in Europe. Which cousin? I interrupted. What's their name? Another look between them. Diana, Courtney said finally. Diana Blackwood. I almost smiled. They were sticking to the script, even now. And where exactly in Europe are these connections? Spain, mostly, Andrew said. Mediterranean coast. Tourism industry. The Costa Brava? This time, both of them went pale. Andrew cleared his throat. Yeah, that area. Why? I opened my purse and pulled out my manila folder. Because, Andrew, I've been to the Costa Brava. Many times, actually. The silence in that room was so thick you could have cut it with Frank's old fishing knife. Mom, I don't understand. 27 years ago, your father and I bought a little stone house in Taça de March. We never told you because you were struggling financially, and we didn't want you to feel bad about our having a second home while you were asking for loans. Courtney's face had gone from pale to green. Andrew looked like he'd been hit by a truck. We called it Casa Esperanza. House of Hope. Maybe you've seen it? Blue shutters, Garden full of herbs, spectacular view of the Mediterranean? Andrew's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I pulled out Tyler's printouts. Funny thing about modern technology, Andrew. You can track almost anything if you know where to look. Flight records, for instance. I spread Courtney's travel itinerary across their coffee table. July 15th to July 22nd. Barcelona to Dallas. Both of you. Then I added the credit card receipts. Notary services. Document translation. Real estate consultation in Taça de March. Andrew finally found his voice. Mom, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let me finish. I pulled out the business registration for CTC Holdings. Courtney Teresa Caldwell, registered agent for the company that owns Blackwood and Associates. The same law firm that's been sending me threatening letters about my Spanish property. Courtney burst into tears. Not pretty tears, but ugly, desperate sobs that shook her whole body. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she gasped between sobs. We just needed the money so badly. Courtney, shut up, Andrew hissed, but she was past listening. The business is failing, Margaret. Has been for months. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The credit cards are maxed out. We found out about the Spanish house from that Christmas photo, and we thought if we could just get you to sign it over. Sign it over for what? Andrew slumped forward, head in his hands. We already promised it to investors, Mom. As collateral for a loan we can't pay back. My heart stopped. You promised them my house? We told them we were inheriting it. That you were planning to transfer ownership to us anyway. Andrew Michael Caldwell. I used his full name, the way I had when he was in serious trouble as a child. Are you telling me you've stolen my house and used it as collateral for a loan? The tears streaming down his face told me everything I needed to know. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when Courtney looked up from her sobbing and whispered. Margaret, if we don't deliver that house to them by Wednesday, they're going to hurt the girls. My granddaughters were in danger because of a house they didn't even know existed. The living room felt like it was spinning. My granddaughters, sweet little Emma and Grace, who still believed in fairy tales and thought their daddy hung the moon, were in danger because of greed and stupidity. Who? My voice came out as a whisper. Who's threatening the girls? Andrew couldn't meet my eyes. Some guys Courtney's cousin introduced us to. They call themselves investors, but they're not investors, I finished. They're loan sharks. Courtney nodded miserably. We borrowed $200,000 from them 6 months ago to save the business. We were supposed to pay it back in 90 days with the profits from a big contract that fell through. So you decided to steal my house to pay your debts. We didn't steal it. Andrew's head snapped up, defensive now. We were going to ask you eventually. We needed a way to guarantee the loan extension first. By forging documents? The silence stretched until Courtney whispered, the papers aren't forged. They're real. Diana Blackwood is a real person. She used to be a paralegal before she got disbarred. She knows how to make documents look legitimate. My hands were shaking as I processed this. So you've actually signed my house over to these people? Not exactly, Andrew said quickly. We signed a promissory note saying we'd transfer ownership by Wednesday. But we can't do that without your signature on the actual deed. And if you don't deliver? Neither of them answered, but I could see the terror in their eyes. Where are Emma and Grace right now? Really? Soccer practice, Courtney said. But they'd been watched. Black car following the team bus. Strange man hanging around the school pickup line. They haven't made direct threats, but the message is clear. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. These weren't just con artists or even typical criminals. These were people who threatened children to collect debts. How much do you owe them now, with interest? Andrew's voice was barely audible. $350,000. $350,000. More than Frank and I had saved in our entire lives. More than Casa Esperanza was worth, even in today's market. And you thought I'd just hand over my house to save you from your own stupidity? Mom, please. No. I stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, their neighborhood looked peaceful, normal. Soccer moms and lawnmowers and children playing. Inside this house, my family was falling apart. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face them. First, you're going to tell me everything. Every detail about these people, their names, how to contact them, what exactly you promised them. Mom, these aren't people you want to mess with. Andrew, I'm 68 years old. I've buried my husband, raised a son, and apparently been far too patient with a daughter-in-law who thinks family secrets are just opportunities waiting to be exploited. Trust me, I can handle whatever trouble you've gotten yourself into. I sat back down and opened my purse again. This time, I pulled out something that made both of them freeze. The deed to Casa Esperanza. Second, we're going to call these investors and arrange a meeting. Because there's something they don't know about that house in Spain. Courtney wiped her eyes. What do you mean? I smiled, and it probably wasn't a nice smile. They think they're getting a quaint little vacation cottage worth maybe $200,000. What they don't know is that the Spanish government has been buying up coastal properties for a new nature preserve. This was a lie, but they didn't need to know that yet. Casa Esperanza has been appraised for forced purchase at €800,000. That's nearly $1 million, Andrew. Both of their mouths fell open. So here's the deal. We're going to meet with your loan sharks, and I'm going to make them an offer they can't refuse. Your debt gets paid, my granddaughters get safe, and you two get exactly what you deserve. Andrew leaned forward eagerly. What do we deserve? I folded the deed and put it back in my purse. You deserve to learn that actions have consequences. And that your mother didn't raise a fool. But first, I had to make sure Emma and Grace were safe, and that meant walking straight into the lion's den. Sunday morning brought an unexpected phone call that changed everything. I was having coffee in my hotel room, reviewing my strategy for the day, when my cell phone rang with an international number. Spanish country code. Mrs. Caldwell? This is Carlos Mendoza. Do you remember me? I sold you and your husband the house in Taza de March. My heart nearly stopped. Carlos? How did you get this number? Is not good news, Mrs. Caldwell. Someone has been asking many questions about your house. They claim to represent you, but something feels wrong. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of questions? They want to know about deed transfers, about how to sell the house quickly. They say you are sick, that your family needs to take control of the property for medical reasons. Sick. They'd told people I was sick to justify taking control of my house. Carlos, I'm not sick. And I haven't authorized anyone to represent me. I thought so. In Spain, we have expressions about the smell of bad fish. This situation, it smells very bad. Carlos explained that a woman calling herself Diana Blackwood had contacted 3 different Spanish law firms, shopping for someone willing to handle an urgent family property transfer. Most had refused because the paperwork seemed suspicious. But Mrs. Caldwell, one firm in Madrid, has agreed to help her. They are not, how do you say, very careful about asking questions. What can they actually do without my signature? In Spain, not much. But if they forge documents, if they claim you are mentally incapacitated, they might convince some officials to freeze the property while they investigate. This could tie up your house for months, maybe years. Months or years. While my granddaughters remained in danger. Carlos, I need your help. Can you contact that Madrid firm and tell them I'm mentally competent and haven't authorized any transfers? Of course. But Mrs. Caldwell, there is something else. The woman, Diana Blackwood, she is coming to Spain this week. She has appointments with the Madrid lawyers on Wednesday. Wednesday. The same day Andrew's loan sharks expected to take possession of Casa Esperanza. I made a decision that surprised even me. Carlos, I'm coming to Spain too. Can you meet me at the Barcelona airport Tuesday evening? Mrs. Caldwell, are you sure this is wise? These people sound dangerous. Carlos, my granddaughters are in danger because of my house. I'm going to make sure they're safe, whatever it takes. After hanging up with Carlos, I called Andrew. Mom? How are you feeling this morning? Angry. Andrew, we need to talk. Meet me in the hotel lobby in 1 hour. Bring Courtney. Mom, the girls have a birthday party this afternoon. The girls are not going to any birthday party. They're not leaving your site until this is resolved. 1 hour, Andrew. When they arrived, both looking like they hadn't slept, I delivered the news about Carlos's call. Diana Blackwood is flying to Spain to try to steal my house through the Spanish legal system. She's telling people I'm mentally incapacitated. Courtney started crying again. Margaret, we didn't know she was going to do that. She said she just needed some paperwork to show the investors. Courtney, stop talking. Every word out of your mouth makes this worse. I turned to Andrew. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call these investors and tell them the deal is off. Tell them I refuse to sign. Mom, you don't understand. These people don't accept no for an answer. Then they're going to love meeting me, because I don't accept threats against my family. I pulled out my phone and showed them the flight confirmation I'd just booked. I'm flying to Barcelona tomorrow morning. I'm going to stop Diana Blackwood from stealing my house, and then I'm going to deal with your loan sharks personally. Andrew went pale. Mom, please don't do this. Stay here, let us handle it. Andrew, you've proven you can't handle anything. It's time for the adults to take charge. And if that meant flying across the Atlantic to protect a house I'd never planned to see again, so be it. Monday morning at the Dallas airport, I stood at the departure gate with my small suitcase and a heart full of determination. But Andrew wasn't giving up without a fight. Mom, please. You don't understand how dangerous these people are. He'd followed me to the airport, leaving Courtney at home with the girls who were now officially under what he called protective supervision, meaning they weren't going to school until this was over. Andrew, I understand perfectly. You borrowed money from criminals, promised them my house as collateral, and now my granddaughters are paying the price for your stupidity. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Son, stop talking about what it was supposed to be and start dealing with what it is. But then Andrew said something that made me pause. Mom, there's something else I haven't told you. About Dad. My blood went cold. What about your father? Andrew looked around the busy airport, then lowered his voice. Remember when Dad had that heart attack? How sudden it was. Andrew, don't you dare. He'd been getting threatening calls, Mom. For weeks before he died. Someone knew about the Spanish house even then. I felt like the world tilted sideways. What are you talking about? Dad called me 2 days before he died. Said someone had been asking questions about overseas investments, about property in Spain. He was scared, Mom. Really scared. Frank, scared? My Frank, who'd served in Vietnam and never backed down from anything in his life. He was going to sell Casa Esperanza. Transfer the money to an account you couldn't access, just in case something happened to him. He was trying to protect you. Andrew, if any of this is true, why didn't you tell me before? Because I thought he was being paranoid. I thought he was just getting old, seeing threats that weren't there. But when Courtney found that Christmas photo with the lockbox, the pieces clicked together in my mind like a jigsaw puzzle I didn't want to complete. You think these same people killed your father? Andrew's silence was answer enough. I sat down heavily in an airport chair, my flight boarding in 20 minutes, and tried to process what he'd just told me. Frank's sudden heart attack. The threatening calls. His plan to sell Casa Esperanza. Mom, these aren't just loan sharks. They're part of something bigger. Something that's been hunting for that Spanish property for years. Then why didn't they just take it after Dad died? Because they needed someone with legitimate claim to sign the papers. They tried to get to you directly, but you're too smart, too careful. So they got to me instead. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly, the defeated slump of his shoulders. This wasn't just about a failed business loan. This was about Andrew being in way over his head with people who had already killed once. Andrew, how long have you known about Dad? I figured it out about a month ago. When Diana Blackwood mentioned that they'd been tracking the property for years, that there had been previous obstacles. Obstacles. They called my husband an obstacle. Mom, if you go to Spain, if you interfere with their plans, they'll kill you too. And then they'll take the girls to force me to sign whatever they want. My boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Flight 447 to Barcelona, now boarding first-class passengers. I stood up, shouldering my purse. Andrew, I need you to understand something. Your father and I didn't work our whole lives, didn't sacrifice and save and dream about the future, just so some criminals could threaten our granddaughters. Mom, please. No. You made your choice when you got involved with these people. Now I'm making mine. I pulled out my phone and showed him a text I'd already sent. I've contacted the FBI about international fraud and threats against U.S. citizens abroad. I've sent them copies of all Tyler's research, all the evidence about the fake law firm, everything. Andrew's face went white. Mom, if the FBI gets involved, these people will disappear. But they'll hurt the girls first. Not if I get to Spain first and remove their motivation. I handed him an envelope. This is a new will, witnessed and notarized yesterday. If anything happens to me, Casa Esperanza goes directly to Emma and Grace in a trust they can't access until they're 30. No one can use it as collateral, no one can force them to sign it away. Mom, you can't. Andrew, I love you. I love Courtney. I love those little girls more than my own life. But I will not spend my remaining years watching over my shoulder, wondering when these people will decide to hurt my family again. The gate agent called for my boarding group. Take care of your daughters. And Andrew? Next time someone offers you easy money, remember that nothing in life is free. Everything has a price. I was about to find out exactly what price I was willing to pay for my family's freedom. Barcelona airport at midnight felt like stepping into a different world. The familiar smell of Spanish coffee and cigarettes, the rapid-fire conversations in Catalan and Spanish, the warm Mediterranean air that carried promises and secrets. Carlos met me at baggage claim, looking older than I remembered but with the same kind eyes that had helped Frank and me fall in love with Casa Esperanza 6 years ago. Mrs. Caldwell, you look tired. But also, dangerous, if I may say so. I almost smiled. I feel dangerous, Carlos. These people threatened my granddaughters. During the drive along the coast to Tossa de Mar, Carlos filled me in on what he'd learned. Diana Blackwood had indeed arrived in Barcelona that afternoon, but she wasn't alone. She travels with 2 men. Americans, but they speak Spanish well enough. They have been asking questions in the village about your house, about who has keys, about security. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest they plan to take possession whether you agree or not. We drove in silence for a while, the Mediterranean coastline dark against the starlit sky. This was the same route Frank and I had taken so many times, usually filled with excitement about our secret getaway. Now it felt like driving toward a battlefield. Carlos, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, Mrs. Caldwell. Has anyone else died because of properties like mine? Americans who owned Spanish real estate and suddenly had accidents? Carlos was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, there have been rumors. A businessman from Chicago, heart attack while visiting his villa in Marbella. A retired couple from Florida, Car accident on a mountain road near their house in Andalusia. Always accidents, always untraceable. But you think they weren't accidents? I think there are people who make very good money helping other people acquire properties from owners who are no longer able to object. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. Mom, please come home. We'll figure out another way. But there wasn't another way. Even if I gave them Casa Esperanza, even if Andrew somehow paid off the loan sharks, these people would never stop. They'd killed Frank when he tried to protect me. They'd keep coming back, keep threatening my family, until someone stopped them permanently. I texted back, take care of the girls. I love you. Then I turned off my phone. Carlos, I need you to do something for me. Something that might be dangerous. Mrs. Caldwell, I have been selling houses on this coast for 30 years. I have dealt with criminals, corrupt officials, and very angry divorcing couples. What do you need? I need you to call Diana Blackwood and tell her that Margaret Caldwell wants to meet. Tomorrow morning, at Casa Esperanza. Tell her I'm ready to sign over the property, but I want to see it one last time. And then? And then we spring a trap that's been 6 years in the making. I pulled out my phone and showed Carlos the photos Frank had taken during our very first visit to Casa Esperanza. But these weren't the same photos I'd been looking at nostalgically. These were different pictures, ones I'd found in Frank's old camera bag just before leaving Dallas. Pictures of Frank talking to a man in an expensive suit. Pictures of strangers examining our house from the road. Pictures of a black sedan following us through the village. Frank had known we were being watched, even back then. But he'd also been preparing for this day. Frank was many things, Carlos, but he wasn't naive. He knew these people would come eventually. I showed Carlos one final photo. Frank, standing in the basement of Casa Esperanza, next to a wall safe I'd never known existed. My husband left me more than just a house in Spain. He left me the tools to protect it. Tomorrow morning, Diana Blackwood was going to discover that some grandmothers bite back. Tuesday morning dawned gray and cloudy over Tossa de Mar, which felt appropriate for what was about to happen. Carlos had arranged the meeting for 10 a.m. at Casa Esperanza, and Diana Blackwood had agreed eagerly, too eagerly for someone who thought they were meeting a helpless old widow. I stood in the kitchen of my Spanish house for the first time in 3 years, remembering Frank making coffee here, laughing at my attempts to speak Spanish with Elena next door, planning the little improvements we'd never gotten to make. The wall-safe Carlos had helped me open an hour earlier sat behind Frank's favorite chair, hidden by a loose stone that looked like part of the original construction. Inside, Frank had left me a gift I never expected. Documentation. Photographs. Recorded phone conversations. Names, dates, bank accounts, business connections. Frank hadn't just known about the threats, he'd been building a case against the people making them. The papers told a story that stretched back years. An international network that specialized in acquiring valuable properties through intimidation, fraud, and when necessary, murder. Casa Esperanza wasn't their first target, and I wouldn't be their first victim. But Frank had also left something else in that safe. Something that made me understand why he'd been so calm in those final weeks, even knowing dangerous people were circling closer. A partnership agreement with the Spanish government's coastal preservation program. Signed and witnessed, transferring Casa Esperanza to the state in exchange for a lifetime residency right and a substantial payout upon my death. The house already belonged to Spain. Diana Blackwood and her associates were planning to steal property that couldn't be stolen, forge documents for a transfer that couldn't happen, threaten my family for something that was already gone. Frank had outmaneuvered them from beyond the grave. My phone rang, a Spanish number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Caldwell? This is Inspector Martinez with the Guardia Civil. We received some very interesting documents from the FBI early this morning. Inspector, I hope you found them useful. Very useful. Mrs. Caldwell, are you currently in Spain? I am. Are you planning to meet with the individuals who have been threatening your family? I am. A pause. Mrs. Caldwell, we would prefer that you not put yourself at risk. We have been tracking this organization for some time. Inspector, with respect, they've already killed my husband and threatened my granddaughters. I'm not hiding from them anymore. Then perhaps we can help each other. Can you delay this meeting for 1 hour? I looked out the window at the Mediterranean, thinking about Frank, about Andrew and Courtney's mistakes, about Emma and Grace who deserve to grow up without fear. Inspector, I can delay it for exactly 1 hour. But then I'm done running. 1 hour is all we need, Mrs. Caldwell. After hanging up, I made one final phone call to Andrew in Dallas. Mom? Are you okay? Are you safe? Andrew, I'm fine. And son? Your daughters are safe too. In about 2 hours, the people who have been threatening our family are going to be in Spanish custody. How? Your father was smarter than any of us gave him credit for. He's been protecting us all along. I could hear Andrew crying on the other end of the line. Mom, I'm so sorry. About everything. About Dad, about the lies, about putting you through this. Andrew, we'll talk about consequences when I get home. But right now, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll raise those girls to be smarter than their parents. To understand that family isn't about money or houses or keeping secrets. It's about protecting each other, no matter what. Because in 10 minutes, Diana Blackwood was going to discover that the Caldwell family had one more secret she hadn't counted on. Diana Blackwood arrived at Casa Esperanza exactly on time, which told me everything I needed to know about how she operated. Professional criminals are always punctual, they have to be. She looked exactly like her Facebook photos, platinum blonde hair, too much jewelry, and the kind of confidence that comes from years of getting away with things. The two men with her were obviously muscle, expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the bulges of concealed weapons. I met them at the garden gate, deed folder in hand, looking every inch the grieving widow who'd finally given up fighting. Mrs. Caldwell, it's so good to finally meet you in person. Diana's smile was practiced, sympathetic. I'm sorry we had to meet under such difficult circumstances. Difficult is one word for it, I replied. Please, come in. I'd like to show you the house before we handle the paperwork. We walked through Casa Esperanza together, Diana making appreciative noises about the view, the stonework, the charming rustic details. Her companions stayed silent, watching me like hawks watching a mouse. It really is a beautiful property, Diana said as we returned to the living room. I can see why your family is eager to keep it in American hands. About that, I said, settling into Frank's favorite chair. There's something you should know about this property that my son probably didn't mention. Diana's smile flickered slightly. Oh? The deed you're planning to forge? The documents you're going to use to transfer ownership? They're worthless. The room went very quiet. Mrs. Caldwell, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I continued, is thinking that you could intimidate an old woman who's been married to a Vietnam veteran for 30 years. I pulled out Frank's partnership agreement with the Spanish government and placed it on the coffee table. Casa Esperanza has belonged to the Spanish government for 18 months. My husband transferred ownership before he died, keeping only lifetime residency rights. You've been planning to steal a house that your victims don't actually own. Diana's face went from confused to angry to calculating in about 3 seconds. Mrs. Caldwell, I think you're mistaken about who the victims are in this situation. One of her companions moved toward his jacket, and I almost laughed. I wouldn't do that if I were you. And why not? Because the Spanish Guardia Civil has been watching this house since sunrise. Because the FBI is currently arresting your associates in Dallas. And because my son-in-law's business debt was forgiven the moment you threatened children. As if on cue, I heard car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I could see Inspector Martinez and 4 other officers approaching the house. Diana Blackwood's professional composure finally cracked. You have no idea what you've done, old woman. This doesn't end here. Actually, it does. I stood up, suddenly feeling younger than I had in years. See, here's what you didn't count on. Frank documented everything. Every threat, every phone call, every attempt to intimidate us. The Spanish police have been building a case against your organization for 2 years. The front door opened, and Inspector Martinez entered with his team. Diana Blackwood, you're under arrest for international fraud, conspiracy, and terroristic threats. As they led her away in handcuffs, she turned back to me one last time. This isn't over. Yes, I said firmly, it is. After the police left, I sat alone in Casa Esperanza for the first time since Frank died. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly blue beyond the garden, and for the first time in months, I felt truly peaceful. My phone rang, Andrew calling from Dallas. Mom, are you okay? The FBI just left our house. They said it's over, that the people threatening us are in custody. It's over, Andrew. You and the girls are safe. Mom, I don't know how to apologize. Andrew, you can apologize by being the father and husband your family deserves. By teaching Emma and Grace that family means protecting each other, not using each other. I looked around the little stone house one final time. Tomorrow, I'd fly back to Asheville and figure out how to rebuild trust with my son. Eventually, we'd all heal from this. But today, I was going to sit in Frank's chair, drink Spanish coffee, and remember what it felt like to be brave. Because sometimes, the most important battles aren't fought by young soldiers, they're fought by grandmothers who refuse to let anyone hurt their families. And you know what? We usually win. Well, there you have it, folks. Margaret's journey from worried grandmother to fierce protector, all because she refused to let criminals intimidate her family. What did you think of Margaret's choice to fly to Spain and confront the threat head-on? Would you have done the same thing, or would you have handled it differently? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from around the world. I love hearing from our international audience. If you enjoyed this story of grandmother courage and family secrets, make sure to subscribe to Madame Susan's Stories for more tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when their families are threatened. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just inspire your own moment of bravery. Remember, respect isn't given by age, it's earned by courage. And sometimes, the most unlikely heroes are the ones who've lived long enough to know that some things are worth fighting for. Thank you for joining me on Margaret's journey. Stay strong, stay smart, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, never underestimate the power of a grandmother who's had enough.